Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Natural Food Pantry Education Series. I'm here with my guest, Brett Hawes, who is here to speak to us about protein. Brett is a certified functional medicine practitioner and clinical nutritionist with additional training in Ayurvedic medicine, iridology, clinical detoxification, and energy medicine. In addition to being a long-standing faculty member at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition in Toronto, Brett has been in clinical practice for 16 years. His virtual clinic focuses primarily on helping people with gut health issues, hormonal imbalances, autoimmune conditions, and detoxification. His podcast, Holistic Health Masterclass, is ranked in the top 200 alternative health and wellness podcasts. Welcome, Brett. Nice to have you again at the Natural Food Pantry.
Hey, Natasha. Great to see you and great to be here and excited for our discussion today.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump right in with some basics. So as practitioners, you and I, we both know that protein is really essential. It's an essential building block for all of our tissues. It's important for regeneration, repair, healing. I think a lot of people listening out there associate protein with muscle mass and building muscle. So talk to us a little bit more about protein and why it's so critical for our bodies, for our health.
Yeah. And, I think you're absolutely correct. In the classes that I teach, I always ask people, what does the general public think of when they think of protein? And I think the two things that come to mind are meat is one, and then muscle mass is the other one, right? But when you really start getting into proteins, what you'll find is, from a structure standpoint, proteins are really just long chains of amino acids. And so the analogy that I like to use is it's like playing Scrabble, right? So we've got 26 letters in the alphabet. And if I'm playing Scrabble, I can take those 26 letters and I can make up all kinds of different words, sentences, paragraphs, chapters of books, and so forth. And so once you understand the basic fundamentals there, then, we're really in a constant process of breaking proteins down into amino acids when we eat. And then in our body, we're basically building up proteins in our body. So of course, muscle mass, your structural proteins like skin, hair, nails, collagen, all that sort of stuff. But most people don't realize that things like enzymes, so digestive enzymes, metabolic enzymes, your hormones are all, they're all amino acids, just in a different configuration. Your brain chemicals and neurotransmitters also all have amino acids as a backbone. So in fact, most proteins in the body are not structural. So they're not actually your hair, skin, nails. They're actually metabolic or functional proteins.
Amazing. Yeah, so I think, people are pretty conscientious of the amount of protein that they get in their diet. Generally, I think people are pretty good at incorporating some kind of protein at breakfast, whether it be eggs or might be dairy or nut butter or something like that. And then at lunchtime, if they're not vegetarian, they're usually incorporating some kind of animal protein. And again, at dinner time, or for those who are vegetarian, they're getting in some soy or some beans or something like that. So do you think people are eating enough protein?
Well, if you look at the Canadian statistics, like the actual government statistics of macronutrient percentages, we are actually getting pretty well bang on the amount that we're supposed to be getting. So if you look at gram for gram, I think Canadians are getting the right amount. Some people might be getting too much, and that really is from overconsumption of meat. And then, of course, on the other side, you might have your elderly, children, vegetarians and vegans who might not be getting enough just in terms of the gram value. But I think a more important discussion to have or a better framing of all of this is how much can we actually digest? So proteins are one of the more difficult things to digest. Carbohydrates are fairly easy to digest. Fats are very difficult to digest, and proteins kind of fit somewhere in the middle. So if we're not actually taking those long, complex, chapters, words, etc., that I was talking about before, if we can't take those and break them down into their individual letters or amino acids, then that right out the gate presents a problem. So a lot of people are actually presenting with functional protein deficiencies. So we're getting enough in terms of diets, but on the back end, we're actually not able to construct the proteins properly in our body because we haven't broken them down properly.
So it's more an issue of digestion, absorption, assimilation,
Yeah.
rather than quantity of protein in the diet.
Exactly. And then, if you want to sort of also get into, and this is not really, vegan versus meat eater or anything like that, but a lot of times we find that plant-based foods are often incomplete in their amino acid profile. So if we're eating a very narrow diet and we're relying on a handful of protein sources from plant-based foods, what typically can happen is that we're low in a couple of amino acids and we're fine in all the rest. But again, the analogy there is like trying to play a game of Scrabble, but instead of 26 letters, you've only got 20.
Yeah, yeah, and if you're missing some of those vowels, it can be pretty critical.
Yeah, exactly.
So then why would someone want to supplement with a protein powder? There's so many protein powders on the market, vegan
Yeah.
protein powders, and there's the whey protein powders. If someone's getting enough, if most people are eating enough protein powders, I get that there's the digestion assimilation issue. Do you think most people should be supplementing with some kind of a protein powder? And if so, what should they be looking for?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's a lot of variables to consider. But without like getting too far into the weeds, I think there's, if you actually look at people that are very active, for example, right? So people that are working out a lot, and especially in our space, we've got a lot of people that are very health conscious. That are trying to eat more fruits and vegetables, which inherently don't have a lot of protein in it. So if you're being called to, or your body needs more protein and you're not getting that in for whatever reason, because of exercise, etc., then obviously supplementing is the preferred way to get your protein levels up. Plain and simple. Now, the challenges with that are obviously, whey protein, for example, was pretty much one of the first, I think it was the first protein supplement on the market. And back in the day when that first came around, everyone was, going gaga for it because, well, it was the only thing that was there. So instead of now eating a 12-ounce steak and digesting it and absorbing it, well, now we just have amino acids, right, in a more digestible format, in a powder format. But what's happened with a lot of people is they've realized now that the dairy component really aggravates a lot of people's gut. So a lot of people get gas, get bloating, etc. They just don't like the whey aspect. And that's where we sort of transition then into soy-based proteins. And of course, people have really fallen out of love with soy for many different reasons. The evolution from there then went into pea protein. And so pea protein, I was working in retail back in the day when pea protein first came on the market, and people were loving pea protein. I mean, it was huge. And what I've noticed over the last 5 years or so is that a lot of people have started having negative reactions. So you'll hear now a lot of people saying, well, I just find that I'm not digesting it very well. I'm getting gas, bloating, GI or digestive upset from those pea-based proteins. And so what the shift is now kind of focused on removing soy, peas, dairy, etc., and kind of working more into plant-based proteins and plant-based protein powders. And that's exactly what Botanica has done with their Perfect Protein. No legumes, no soy, no dairy. So what we found is that a lot of people, most people that I speak to who have tried it, always say, it doesn't give me any digestive upset. It's very well absorbed, and we can kind of get into some of the nitty gritty if you want with what makes those protein powders superior, if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love Botanica. I have a bit of a sensitive digestive system myself, and I noticed that it's really easy to digest. It's really smooth. So the protein used in the Botanica one is quinoa, coconut, and rice. And
Yeah.
that's quite a unique formula. So yeah, I'd love for you to share why the coconut and why the quinoa. Rice is a pretty common one.
Yeah. So if you get into quinoa, I mean, I think quinoa is the most straightforward one because, again, coming back to what I was saying about plant-based proteins, when you get into complete proteins versus incomplete, your complete proteins basically have all of the essential amino acids in them, right? And so what we find is that if you look at most plant-based food sources, they're incomplete. So they're lacking in one or more of those essential amino acids. So quinoa actually has a full profile. So it's technically a complete protein, or it has all of the essentials. So of course it makes sense to use that in a plant-based powder, because the thing we wouldn't want to have in a plant-based protein powder is to only give people 4 of the 9 letters or what have you. So we want to try and make it a complete protein. The coconut is also interesting because it fits somewhat of a similar profile, but we've actually used it. The flavor is one thing, the texture is another thing, and we haven't actually isolated or extracted the protein from coconut. We've actually just added it in there. So what you'll notice when you look at the label is you'll actually see that it's a slightly higher calorie protein powder. You'll also see that there are actually some carbs, which again can be good or bad depending on what you're trying to follow. And then there's also some fibers. So instead of being more like a whey powder, which is just 100% protein, this is actually more of a whole food protein powder. So you'll see that obviously the feature is going to be the amino acids and the proteins, but then you're also going to have some fats. You're also going to have a very low amount of carbs in there as well that are naturally occurring. So we haven't added anything. So I think the texture, the flavor as well, the coconut really works very well together with the other 2 ingredients. And then of course, whichever flavor you buy, we do have the organic vanilla or chocolate flavoring as well.
Yeah, the coconut really sweetens it up. I noticed that they don't add any sweetener to it, so the coconut does the job. I love coconut; it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic product to add to so many different things. Like a lot of people think smoothies when it comes to protein powder, and that's a great way to get it in for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I've used it in baking in place of some flours and baking mixes, so pancakes and things like cookies and muffins for the kids, and flour bars. It's a great addition to those kinds of foods. I found some really cool recipes on the Botanica website, botanicahealth.com. There's some really creative, fun, healthy recipes on there.
Yeah, and especially for especially for children, trying to get protein into children. Children their palate is so different that they don't always like to eat meat and fish and eggs all the time. So they tend to naturally gravitate more towards the carbs because of the energy, right? And so you're right. I mean, I've done that with my son, where I'll make power balls and granola bars and stuff at home, and I'll actually use that. And when you look at the protein count, all of a sudden the protein count goes way up, which is of course great for many different reasons.
Yeah. Now, Botanica also has elevated protein powders with added herbs. So can you talk to us a little bit about those?
Yeah. So what we did was we took the original formula, which is 20 grams of plant-based protein, plant-based protein. I will just mention one thing before I say that. We actually, I believe we're the only plant-based protein powder on the market that has 3.5 grams of branched chain amino acids. So for those people watching this who are obviously interested in bodybuilding and working out and athletics, the dosage normally of people taking supplements on the side is around 3 to 5 grams of BCAAs. So this actually naturally occurring has 3.5 grams, which is amazing. So what we did was we took that original formula and we simply added 3 herbs or nutraceuticals to come up with 3 variations of our perfect protein elevated. So we have an adrenal support, we've got an anti-inflammatory, and then we have a brain booster. Those are the 3 variations. The adrenal product has reishi, it has ashwagandha, and then it has acerola cherry in there. So ashwagandha, very well known as an adaptogen, obviously. And these are also in therapeutic dosages, I should add. These are not like sprinkles. So instead of creating a product that had like 20 or 25 different herbs in small amounts, we said, well, look, let's just go with 3 and let's use them in therapeutic amounts. And the intention there is to basically say, well, look, if you were taking reishi, if you were also taking ashwagandha, if you were also taking vitamin C, well, why not make it easier for yourself so you can actually get this all in one, and maybe a great addition to the smoothie or a pre-workout or something to that effect. So that's the intention behind it. These are whole foods, so we don't use any isolates. We're not using any extracts. It's not an extract of reishi. It's a whole reishi. Ashwagandha, and then the acerola cherry. The anti-inflammatory one is turmeric, ginger, and moringa leaf. Okay, so I think that most people would be familiar. Turmeric, I mean, there's so much buzz around turmeric. There has been for a while. So obviously it's a very powerful anti-inflammatory. Same with ginger, very good in terms of digestion and being a carminative as well. And then the moringa leaf has tons of trace minerals and is very, very alkalinizing. So a lot of people that are prone to inflammatory issues, you'll find that their body tends to be quite over acidic, and also they lack trace minerals. Okay. The third one is the brain booster. So we have lion's mane, which is a medicinal mushroom. Lion's mane for the brain is a great way to remember it. Very, very good for the brain and the nervous system. And then we also have rhodiola, which is another adaptogen that's a little bit more energizing in a sense. Ashwagandha can be quite grounding for people, so it's very more calming and steady energy, whereas rhodiola is a little bit more get up and go. And then we actually have quinoa sprouts in there, believe it or not, which we identified they have a lot of B vitamins. So instead of isolating the B vitamins from the quinoa sprouts, we actually added in 400 milligrams of quinoa sprouts. And, on the slide deck that I use, we actually have a breakdown, and you'll see that in some instances, we actually have 10 times the RDAs for certain B vitamins. So,
wow.
Yeah. And they all, taste amazing, great flavors. I'm sure you can attest to that as well. Pretty much everyone we sample these with, they love the taste and the flavor, not so chalky and gritty like you would have on a lot of the plant-based proteins.
Yeah, the only challenge really might be which one to take.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Now, would you recommend that someone stay on the elevated protein for a long period of time, or take it for a little while and then go on to the regular protein powder?
I mean, if I just going through the ingredients, the only thing that I would perhaps caution about, but because we're using whole foods, I don't really see it as a problem, would be things like ashwagandha and rhodiola. If you think about things like acerola cherry or ginger or turmeric, that's really food. So you could take them indefinitely. Same thing with lion's mane. The dosage that's in there is not a full, it's, you're not getting above 2 grams. It's 750 milligrams. So it's kind of like half of a therapeutic dose, if you will. But yeah, I think it's perfectly safe. I mean, quinoa sprouts, you could eat that forever. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. Yeah.
Okay, love it. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Brett, for joining us and for sharing your knowledge with our Natural Food Pantry customers.
You are most welcome. Thanks for having me.
For more information on Botanic Perfect Protein, visit botanicahealth.com. Thanks everyone for following our education series. I invite you to check out more health videos on our Natural Food Pantry YouTube page or on the homepage of our website, and subscribe to our newsletter at naturalfoodpantry.ca. Please be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Stay healthy, everyone.